refused to leave her cell to hear the judge's sentence or to hear the victim impact statements. Joining me now is Steve Gillan, General Secretary of the Prison Officers Association. Steve, it's good to have you with us. Thanks for making the time. So as I said there, Lucy Letby refused to come up to hear the sentencing. And this isn't the first time we've heard in high-profile cases someone like this not coming up to hear their punishment. Is this becoming more of a trend?
I think in high-profile cases it's becoming more of a trend, but put it in context, 99.9% of prisoners do attend court for sentencing. My thoughts are with the victims here, and I worry about the whole thing being politicised by the main parties. I mean, we've heard the sort of rhetoric today from the Conservative Party and indeed the Labour Party about bringing forward legislation. Well, let me be clear, we don't need new legislation. The courts and judges have the power to tell a prisoner to come before them. And let me explain in the context of that, because I think it's very important actually. Prison officers who work in our prisons will go round of an evening or maybe in the morning to get the prisoners ready for court. If a prisoner says that they're not going to court, then at the first available opportunity, the courts will be made aware of that. Now, if a judge or the court determines that the prisoner will attend, then that prisoner will attend.
Right, and that will be through an order from the judge that the prisoner must be brought before.
A court can order a prison officer or a prison governor to use force on a prisoner. But what can happen is, if the court determines that that prisoner is to attend, then a reasonable order will be given by the prison officer and a senior officer.
So just to be clear, you could put your hands on a prisoner and drag them up into court if an order was made?
Well, we wouldn't say drag them up into court. We would say that our use of force policy would come in, and it's got to be reasonable and proportional and lawful. So if a court says that that prisoner must attend court, that prisoner will attend court.
And why is that not happening in some of these cases? I mean, we know the case of Lucy Letby, but Thomas Cashman, who shot Olivia Pratt-Bell, also didn't go up to court, to the utter dismay of Olivia's mother. Why wasn't a court order put in place?
Well, I'm not sure of the court's rationale behind that on those separate cases, but I'm just telling your viewers what actually is in place. So it doesn't need new legislation. It just needs the judges and the courts to determine whether that person appears. Now, I'm not saying that it's simple, because that judge or court may have to weigh up the practicalities of that. So if someone, for example, is so medically unfit that they can't, so I think that would be taken into consideration. But in relation to these so high-cold profile cases, I think it's a slap in the face for the victims' families. And I think we've got to, as a country, start thinking more of the victims. And the rationale should be explained. If a prisoner is focusing on saying that they're not coming, then I think the court should explain why they've made that decision not to make them come.
Right, so you would like to hear judges explaining more often why they've decided not to force that prisoner to come up. Do you think that judges then, in the examples that we've talked about, are perhaps too sensitive to the perpetrator's feelings and their physical well-being?
Well, I'm not criticising any judges in this country, because in actual fact, judges have been very robust, and I have myself, and with my experience, I have sat in Crown courts where judges have been robust. So when a prisoner has disrupted, even through a trial, judges will carry on. So judges do not take things lightly. They may have a reason. They may not want an individual to focus attention on themselves and any more power over the victim's families, or the victim indeed.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because as we know, Lucy Letby is one of only 4 women to have got a whole life term. One of the other women who got a whole life term is Joanne Dennehy. Now, she did go to the doctor here at sentencing, and the reporting suggests that she laughed when the judge described her as a selfish, manipulative serial killer. We don't want that sort of thing happening in the dock, do we? That's the point.
Well, the reality is a judge wouldn't be able to control what's happening in the dock. The reality is we get all sorts of characters coming before it. Some cry when they're sentenced, some have other emotions when they're sentenced, some have no emotion, and some will try to disrupt the court. Let's make no bones about that. But the reality is I think the British public do want to see justice served from start to finish. And I think part of those individuals listening to the victim impact statements from the families, bearing in mind these families have sat through weeks and months of a trial listening to horrendous evidence. And I think it's only justice that someone shouldn't be cowardly and they should be forced to go up into the dock. Simple as that.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that you don't think the legislation needs to come into force because of the reasons that you bring up. Some other people who've commented on this have talked about video feeds and audio in the cells to make sure that the perpetrator actually hears what's being said. I mean, that feels to me like quite an easy fix that we could bring in.
Well, there are different options. There's video links that are in use now, and it may well stop, because what I'm afraid of actually is that if prison officers determine that they're going to use force